Alright, so this is a class on bookmarking, how to create and use bookmarks. The goal of the class is to teach you how to make and use bookmarks in order to help you safely navigate through nullsec. If you have any questions, please use the question feature like I said already on the right hand side. Or speak up in comms is cool. A lot of this information that I'm going to be sharing with you here kind of overlaps with another class that Independent Variable put on. She goes into a little bit more detail about fittings and how modules work and stuff like that. So check out her class if you haven't yet. It's available in the All Classes section of the Flightschool. You can watch a recorded video of it. Alright, so bookmarks. Bookmarks are saved locations in space that can be warped to. Some common types of bookmarks include instant dock and undocks, safes, tacticals, and other objects. So how do you create bookmarks? The places in the people and places window is where you create and manage your bookmarks. You can open your people and places window by clicking the icon on your neocon bar that looks like a magnifying glass over a person. From there, you can press the Add Location button to create a bookmark. This will open the new location window, where you can then label the bookmark, add notes, and choose where it will be saved. So if you look on the slide, the People and Places window is shown on the bottom right. And when you click that Add Location button at the bottom of that window, it'll bring up the new location window, where you can then label things and choose where it goes. So the bookmark will be made at the location of your ship when the Submit button is pressed. This is important to remember. Also, pressing Ctrl+B is a shortcut to bring up the new location window. So you're going to want to remember this so you don't have to use the People and Places window every time you want to make a bookmark. You can also right-click objects in space and create a bookmark for that object by selecting Save Location. This is useful for bookmarking things like wormholes or mobile tractor units, so you can save the exact location of the object instead of the location of your ship near that object. In the People and Places window, you can press the Create Folder button to make folders so you can organize your bookmarks. Be sure to name and organize your bookmarks. What you're going to want to do is come up with a naming and organization system that works for you. You can create a shorthand or use symbols like exclamation points or pound signs for different types of bookmarks. You can organize your bookmarks in folders by system name or by what type of bookmark it is. Also, it's a good idea to create a temp or junk folder and just save all your newly created bookmarks in that folder. That way later you can go through them, make sure they're all properly labeled, and organize them how you want to. This is very helpful because a lot of times you don't always have the time or want to take the time to make sure that you're naming your bookmarks exactly how you want them to, or make sure that they're going in the correct folder that you want them to be in. So having that little junk folder just kind of creates this little buffer that you can then sit down, when you have time after a fleet or whenever you're done flying around and organize things properly. You can access your bookmarks through the People and Places window. However, it can be a bit cumbersome. Instead, you can right-click an empty space, look under the Personal Locations area, and interact with your bookmarks. Only the bookmarks in your current system will appear with this method. And you can see an example of that on the left-hand side of your screen. You can also open up individual folders in your People and Places window by double-clicking them, or by right-clicking and selecting Open Group Window. Setting up your bookmarks like this can be helpful for systems that you frequent often, as you won't have to fumble through tree menus while quickly trying to access your bookmarks. If you're creating bookmarks and editing bookmarks with group folders open, you may need to open the People and Places window to update them. It's kind of a weird little bug within Eve. If you create a bookmark without having that People and Places window open, sometimes it might not update right away for you with your individual folder, with the folder or group windows for your bookmarks. So just keep that in mind. But an example of having your bookmarks opened up, or excuse me, an example of having the folders opened up into different windows with your bookmarks in them can be shown on the right-hand side of the screen. So you're going to want to, like I said, you're going to want to find and create a system that works for you and do your best to stick to it. Unlabeled and poorly organized bookmarks can be a headache and also might get you killed if you're unlucky. You can share bookmarks by holding Shift and dragging a selected bookmark from your People and Places window to your ship's cargo. Holding Shift copies the bookmark, leaving it in your personal locations. Not holding Shift will still move the bookmark, but not keep it saved for yourself. Once in your cargo, you can trade it just like any other item. If you want to use a bookmark given to you, drag it from your cargo into a folder, into your if you want to use the bookmark that someone was given to you, drag it from your cargo into a folder in your personal locations group in the People and Places window. And some people actually buy and sell bookmark packs for safes and tax. So you can look for that and you might be able to make some money. And also when selling escalation sites, if anyone's familiar with that, that's how you do it. You actually go to the site, make a bookmark for the gate, and then actually sell the bookmark to the gate. All right, moving on. Corp bookmarks are bookmarks that can be created and accessed by everyone in the corporation. The corporation can save up to 500 bookmarks. So because of this limit, it's important when creating new bookmarks for yourself that you save them in the personal locations group and not in the corporation locations. So you can kind of see some examples of that on the left-hand side, the little thumbs up for saving bookmarks in the personal locations section, and the thumbs down for saving something in the corporation locations. So don't create and edit corporation bookmarks. That's kind of Horde rule number 1 there.
So there's no privilege setting on the corp bookmarks area?
No, anyone can create bookmarks. You can't, and you can only delete or edit the bookmarks that you created, unless you have roles that, like a communications officer, I think it is within the corp, that will allow you to edit other people's bookmarks. So, it's best just not to save corp bookmarks. Sometimes you might do it by accident, so just be aware that it is possible, and that whenever you save bookmarks for yourself, you want to make sure that you're doing it in the personal location section and not in the corporation location section. So using corp bookmarks, the easiest way to see what corp bookmarks are in system that you are in is to just right-click on empty space and look under the corporation locations section. If there are any in that system, you'll see them organized as tacticals, POSs, and so on. You can see an example of that on the bottom left of the screen. So Horde has corp bookmarks in most of our soft space and systems around it, but not all systems will have corp bookmarks. It's also good to be aware of, it's also, don't always trust corp bookmarks. So Horde is pretty much open to everyone, and it's not really hard to steal our bookmarks. So don't be surprised if you warp to attack and there's a bubble camp there. It can happen. So only use corp bookmarks if you have nothing else. I strongly recommend that you make your own set of safes and tacks and systems you frequently travel through. So, but if you do use a corp bookmark like a tactical or a perch, warping to it at a range can help avoid problems like this. So if you warp to a tactical, let's say at 50 kilometers off, That way, when you land on it, you might not get stuck in a bubble, or there might not be someone that has that tactical and is able to instantly warp to you. Any questions so far? All right. So as a side note, you can choose to display your bookmark locations in space. You can open the sensor overlay settings by clicking on the outer circle of your ship HUD or by pressing Control O. Corporation locations will show up as a star type icon, and personal locations will show up as a pushpin type icon. You can interact with these brackets icons in space by right-clicking on them or by using the radial menu. So that's pretty much the basics of bookmarks. Now we're going to talk about some common types of bookmarks that people make. So instant dock and undocks. An instant dock is a bookmark that is on a station at 0 in its docking range. Sometimes when you warp to a station, you may land just outside of the docking range. If that happens, you'll need to slow boat a bit till you get into range. If there are bad guys camping a station, they might be able to kill you before you get into range. So instant dock bookmarks put you in docking range every time. It's also a good idea to make your instant dock bookmarks away from the station's undock to avoid camps on the station's undock. An instant undock is a bookmark that allows you to instantly warp when undocking from a station, thus avoiding anyone camping the station undock. When you undock, you're temporarily invulnerable for a short period of time or until you do something like locking a target or warping. You're also traveling at max speed, so there's no delay when warping as long as you don't have to align. To make an instant undock bookmark, you're going to want to undock from the station in a fast ship with a micro warp drive. When you undock, press Control Space to stop your ship. You do this because you'll randomly fly away at various angles, and stopping your ship will prevent this. From there, next you're going to want to align your camera from inside the station undock and double-click in the direction straight out from it. Double-clicking in space to manually pilot your ship will allow you to adjust your angle. Also, turning on your tactical overlay, Control D can help you stay aligned with the undock. Instant undock bookmarks must be at least 150 kilometers from and in line with the undock. Remember this because you can't warp to objects unless they are further than 150 kilometers away from your ship. This is very important. And of course, once you create these bookmarks, it's a good idea to test them. Okay, so now I got a video of me making some instant dock and instant undock bookmarks. Okay, so here's the video. Everyone's seen the video, right?
Yep.
Okay, great. So this is me. I'm making an instant dock bookmark. You can see me fly away from the station's undock. And I'm moving to a place that's close to the station and within docking range so I can create a bookmark. So I'm just kind of moving my ship around. Kind of fumble here a little bit, of course, I'll catch it on video, but so once I'm at 0 kilometers off the station, you can see it on my overview. I'll create the bookmark and that's it. So here's me testing the bookmark. So I'm warping to a tactical off the station right now. And when I land, I can see that there's no bubbles or anything that causes any concern. And from there, I can warp to my instant dock bookmark, landing in docking range, and dock up right away.
Docking permission requested. Docking request accepted. Docking permission requested.
Okay, so now I'm going to make an instant undock. So as soon as I undock, you can see how my ship veers off, which is why we hit control space to stop the ship. So my ship kind of turns a little bit and I stop my ship. Once stopped, I move my camera so that I'm looking out from the station's undock. And then I double click in space to move my ship in a direction straight out from the undock. Once you you can kind of see how the tactical overlay here helps to make sure that you're still aligned properly. And once you get in the right direction, you can turn your micro warp drive on and burn away. So once you're at least 150 kilometers away from the station, you can see that I'm going a bit further than this, which is a good idea because 150 kilometers off the station is just a very common bookmark. It's good to kind of mix things up and to go that, just to spend a little bit more time, travel a little bit further. That way you have a bookmark that's not common or something that someone else might have the exact same range as you just made. So once I'm happy with how far I've gone, I just hit submit and create the bookmark. And then I test it. So as soon as you undock, warp to your new instant undock bookmark and you should instantly warp off.
Drive active.
So there you go. So you're going to use these bookmarks in high traffic areas. You're going to move these bookmarks in high traffic areas like Jita, Amar when undocking in low sec, or excuse me, let me say that again. You're going to use these bookmarks in high traffic areas like Jita or Amar and when undocking in low or null sec with neutrals in system. So it's a good idea to make these bookmarks for stations that you use often. Many stations in our soft space have citadels placed on the station's undock, so you can use those citadels as your instant undock by warping to them instead of a bookmark. If you use an undock and there are no bubbles, you should be able to warp off with no problems. If there is a bubble, you're just going to want to redock and get safe. So are there any questions about that? Oh, here we go. So here we go. Flex, yes. Does warping directly to a station not warp you into docking range? For the most part, it does. However, you may notice that every once in a while, when you warp to a station, your ship might just have to travel a little bit closer before you're able to initiate that docking and actually dock. So it's just a good idea to have these instant dock bookmarks on stations that you commonly use. That way, if you're in something large, like a freighter or an industrial ship or even, like a big battleship or something like that, you don't end up like having to slow boat and spend some time in space that you don't want to. Any other questions about instant dock and undocks?
Well, it's not really a question, but concerning in docking up, even if you have an insta-dock bookmark, if you have a combat infraction timer up, you won't be able to dock. Is that correct? That still mechanic exists.
Yeah, any type of weapons timer or something like that, or what do they call aggression timer? Anything like that that prevents you from docking will always prevent you from docking, whether you're on an instant undock or not. So the idea of the instant dock bookmark is to just get you on the station at 0 in docking range every time, so that you don't need to move anywhere else. And so it's a spot in space that's near the station that'll allow you to dock up every time. Okay, so moving on. I mentioned something about bubbles, so let's talk about them for just a moment here. Warp disruption fields, or bubbles as everyone else calls them, come in 3 different packages and can only be used in nullsec or wormhole space. There's mobile warp disruptors, and these are anchored bubbles that come in a variety of sizes. They'll stay active until they're destroyed, unanchored, or if CCP resets the grid. There are warp disruption probes, and they are deployed by interdictors, or dictors for short, and they last for 2 minutes. And then the third one is the warp disruption field generators, which are large bubbles that radiate from heavy interdictor ships, also known as HICs. They stay active until turned off or the ship dies. So the latter two are primarily used for tackling entire fleets. If you're inside a bubble, you cannot warp away. So with the exception of certain ships that are immune to warp disruption fields, of course. We're going to talk about mobile warp disruptors, which are generally used for defensive purposes and gate camps. So let's go over some bubble mechanics here. So bubbles pull ships out of warp if the warp vector intersects the bubble and if the bubble's edge is within 500 kilometers of the warp destination. So ships warping to the destination from within the red area may be influenced by the bubble. So you can see that in the little graphic. If you warped to that destination point from anywhere inside that red area, you may get stuck in the bubble. And of course, if you warped from it in the green area, you would avoid that bubble. Also, just to say again, if you're in a bubble, you cannot warp. And you can pass through a bubble. You can pass through a bubble in warp if it's more than 500 kilometers from your destination. So you can see an example of that there. Are there any questions about this?
That includes micro warp drive.
Micro warp drives can be used inside bubbles.
Okay, good to know.
Yep. The only thing that turns off your micro warp drive are warp scramblers, which are modules that are used to tackle you. They turn off your warp drive and your micro warp drives. Okay, so here's some more information about them. The bubble will catch you if it's in line with your warp vector and less than 500 kilometers in front of your destination. You can see a picture of that. The bubble will drag you if it's in line with your warp vector and less than 500 kilometers behind your destination. Sorry, I was getting messaged. Okay. Also, so the bubble will drag you if it's in line with your warp vector and less than 500 kilometers behind your destination. You can see a picture of that too. And so because of this is why it's not a good idea to warp gate to gate when traveling through nullsec. The best way to avoid bubbles is not to warp directly to your out gate. Instead, you're going to want to bounce to an unaligned bookmark or celestial, such as unaligned safes, perches, tacticals, planets, anomalies, asteroid belts, and so on. So, any questions about that? All right. So, back to bookmarking then. So, safe spots are bookmarks deep in space. They can be used to escape or hide if you get into trouble. Warping to a safe is better than warping to celestial because your enemies can't immediately follow you to a safe. Safes can be used to get around stop and drag bubbles on gates, like we just saw in those images. Also, deep safes are safe spots that are out of D-scan range from stargates and other celestials. Safe spots can be probed down if you're safed up hiding from bad guys. Excuse me. Safe spots can be probed down. If you are safed up hiding from bad guys, stay mobile, make additional safe spots, align to them, watch your D-scan for combat probes, and warp off to a new safe when they appear. So if you are being chased and probed down, it's a good idea not to use the same safe more than once. You're going to want to continue to make safes as you warp around. Also, warping to safe spots at range can help preserve that safe. And in order to make a safe, you're going to want to warp to something like a celestial, and while in the middle of warp, you're going to create a bookmark. So this is an example of the system FTAC-N, and let's say I'm in FTAC-N and I want to make a safe. So my starting point is going to be A, which happens to be a citadel, and from A I'll warp to B, an asteroid belt. So while I'm in warp from A to B, I'll create a bookmark, and that bookmark we'll call Y. Y is what is called an aligned safe, because it's a safe spot that is in line with points A and B. Aligned safes are fine, but just be aware that if you made an aligned safe between two gates, or someone placed a bubble that intersects that warp vector, you'll still be caught when warping from your safe to the gate, which is why unaligned safes are better. So to make an unaligned safe, you can warp from your aligned safe Y to another celestial. In this example, I'll warp to C, Charlie, which happened to be another asteroid belt. Once again, while I'm warped from Y to C, I will create another bookmark. That bookmark we'll call Z. Z is an unaligned safe because when warping to a celestial or gate from it, no other warpable object in space will intersect with your bookmark. So this will significantly reduce your chances of being caught by a bubble camp. Alright, I got another video here of this actually being done. Okay, so I open up the map and see how the system's laid out, and I come up with a plan. And I warp to an asteroid belt at 100 kilometers, and I'll save a bookmark while in mid-warp. So I'll then warp to the aligned safe I just made once I land.
Warp drive active.
And I'll get ready to make another bookmark. So once I get out of warp at my once I get out of warp at my aligned safe, I'll warp to another celestial. And once I get to where I want to be, I'll save that bookmark. And I just made an unaligned safe. Now I'm going to warp to that safe that I just made.
Warp drive active.
And I can check to see if it intersects with any warpable objects in that system. So I'll look at the map here and just kind of go through each little celestial and gate. You can see that nothing really intersects with this spot. And it looks good. So there's multiple ways to create unaligned safes. That's just one example. For instance, another way to create an unaligned safe would be to bookmark 2 aligned safes and then create a third bookmark while warping between them. So all systems are different, both in size and layout. Some methods will work better in different circumstances, of course. Any questions about making safes? All right, now we're going to talk about tacticals then. So a tactical bookmark, also known as a tack, perch, or ping, is a bookmark used for many different applications. The most common being bookmarks at least 150 kilometers off of a gate or station. So while unaligned safes will significantly reduce your chances of getting caught in a bubble, a tactical will allow you to get eyes on the object and visually confirm that it is safe to warp to. So having multiple tacks on gates or structures that you camp or fight on a lot can help you warp on top of targets and engage them. Tacks can also be off-grid, but in D-scan range to find out what, if anything, is on the gate or object you are warping to. So you can make a tactical bookmark in a few ways. You can burn off of an object in a random direction and create a bookmark once you are at least 150 kilometers off. You can also warp to an object at 100 kilometers from an unaligned safe. From there, you can burn the rest of the way off and save a bookmark once you're at least 150 kilometers away. Or you can create a bookmark at that point that you landed and then warp back to your safe. Once back at your safe, warp to the bookmark you just made at 100 kilometers, and this will put you at 200 kilometers off the object from an unaligned safe. Another way to make a tactical is to warp to an object from an unaligned safe, warp to it at range just to be safe. So while you're in warp, you'll have the new location window open, ready to make a bookmark, just like you do when making safes. Keep an eye on your distance to your destination, and once you're within a few thousand kilometers of your destination, save a bookmark. If done right, this will create a tack that is on grid and a good distance from your object without having to burn anywhere. When it comes to naming your tacticals, label what object they are on and how far away from the bookmark it is. You can also use the star. You can also use the star in the system as a reference when naming bookmarks. So what you do is just a tip. What you can do is you can imagine you're looking at the gate from the star's point of view. Bookmarks that appear to the left of the gate can be labeled as being 300 kilometers left. Those between the star and the gate are in front of it. You can label them as being behind, above, below, and so on, whatever works for you. And I got a video of me making some tacticals here. So as you can see, I just jumped into a system, and since everything's clear, I decided to make a tack. And in this case, I just turn on my micro warp drive and start burning down. It's a good idea not to make bookmarks directly straight up and down of gates because they're very common. It's good to add a little angle at times. So when I open up the new location window, create my bookmark once I get far enough away. Also, it's good to make your tacticals off gates a little bit more than 150 kilometers away, like around 200 kilometers. That way, if you're actually on that gate when you jump through, you can warp to that tactical. Because sometimes when you jump through a gate, you're about 10 kilometers off of that gate that you just came through. So if you want to warp to a tactical that's only 150 kilometers off that gate, if you're anywhere between that tactical and the gate, you might not be able to warp to that tactical. So going the extra distance is a good thing. This time, I'm at an unaligned safe, and I warp to a gate at 100 kilometers. So from here, I could burn away, but instead, I'm going to create a temporary bookmark and then warp back to my safe. So once I land, I warp to the temporary bookmark at 100 kilometers. Once I land here, I then create my tactical bookmark, and I'll delete the temporary one just to get it out of there and keep things clean. Alright, so now this time I'll start again on an unaligned safe, and I'll warp to the gate I want to make attack on at 100 kilometers. Keep an eye on your distance to your destination. Once you're within a few thousand kilometers, create your bookmark while you're still in warp. You have to be quick, and it can take some practice when doing this, but it can be very effective in making fast tacticals.
Warp drive active.
So then I'll warp back to my bookmark and rename it. You can see I'm like 800 kilometers off or something like that, I think. Alright, so lastly I'll show you an example of how bookmarks can help you engage an enemy. So let's say I just jumped into this system and I spot a bad guy above me. The cargo container will be the bad guy. So I can't warp directly to the cargo container, or to the bad guy rather, because I don't have a bookmark that's directly on top of him. But if I bounce to attack on the side and then warp to another bookmark at range, I can get pretty close. So this can be helpful if you're fighting on a gate or a structure a lot, to have multiple bookmarks and tacks. Okay, so that's it. Those are the basic types of bookmarks. And now we can go make some bookmarks. Let's see, we got a question here though. What is the furthest distance from the gate that would still be on grid? This is one of those questions where it depends is the answer. Grid sizes, I think, are about 8,000 kilometers. So, and they vary. Where like a grid is think of a grid as basically like a sphere in space, like an area in space that's like a sphere, and it's about 8,000 kilometers wide. So that doesn't mean that once you get 8,001 kilometers away from a gate that you'll then be off grid, and anything from 8,000 kilometers to that gate will be on grid. That's not the case. It just varies on how the space is set up. So the best way to judge it is to just test it. So you'll make a bookmark, you'll be a few thousand kilometers off of the gate, and if you can see anything on that gate, then you'll know that you're on grid. If someone jumps into the system or is on that gate and you don't actually see them on your overview or visually in space, then you're off grid. Does that make sense? Hope that made sense.
Sounds good, man.
So if you can see the gate but you can't see other ships, you're off or on?
You'll be off grid. You'll still be able to see the gate, but you won't be able to see any activity. So like if there's a bubble on the gate or if there's ships on the gate, you won't be able to see them.
In that case, you would just do a short range D-scan and look if there's anything on the gate, maybe.
You could do that. Yep, that's a good tactic on flying around. You could have that off grid safe, or excuse me, that off grid tack, so you're in D-scan range of it. That way, if something does jump through into system, or if you're checking to make sure that there's no camps or anything like that, you can use your directional scanner and scan down that gate. That way, whoever's on that gate, they won't know that you're actually there, like watching them. They might think you're somewhere else, but you will be able to get some kind of intel on them if there is anything on that gate. Okay, so what is your approach for gate pings that you need quickly? Maybe because there is no ping for the gate, and yet your enemies are near. I'm not sure exactly what you mean by this, Daryl. Can you go into more detail on that?
It's like, there's maybe a camp on the other side. They may jump through. You don't have a ping for the gate, but your fleet needs them. You know what I mean?
Okay, so let's say you're scouting for your fleet, and your fleet needs a ping on the gate because there's a bubble or something like that on the gate. Is that what you're asking?
Maybe that. You just warp there at 100 and burn up or down, or make a ping further out when you before you land on it, or
you won't want to. If you make a perch or a tactical while mid warp from gate to gate, it won't really matter because you'll still be in line with that bubble. You'll still be in that same warp vector of those two gates, and so if there's a bubble that is intersecting those vectors, you'll still get caught in that bubble if you make the ping anywhere in that warp vector. So the best way to do it is if you're scouting or something like that in an interceptor and you're warping gate to gate, getting eyes on gates for your fleet, and there is a bubble on that gate that you just warp to. From there, you can either warp to a ping that you have for yourself already bookmarked that is not aligned with that bubble in the gate that you came from, or you can then just start burning with your micro warp drive, just burn and make your own little ping or perch with your interceptor. And so then once you are at least 150 kilometers away from that gate, then you can let your fleet know, hey guys, I have the perch, and then they can warp to you, avoiding that bubble, and then once they land on you, then they can warp directly to that gate and bypass that bubble. Is that kind of what you wanted to ask?
Yeah, that's what I was aiming for a bit, yes.
Okay. Yeah, so there's no... when you're scouting like that, if you don't have the tactical bookmark already made, you just have to make your own. And then while you're burning that perch, you might as well save it, because you might need it again. So it's also a good idea when you're flying around with fleets and stuff like that. If that ever happens, just go ahead and make a bookmark when your fleet warps to that perch. That way you can be that guy next time that says, like, oh, there's a bubble on there, does anyone have a perch? You can speak up and say, yeah, I got a perch or something like that. And it might be helpful at some other point. So it's always good just to make bookmarks, and that's why that temp or junk folder can be very helpful, because you can just quickly make a rough bookmark and name it, and then later go back through and organize it however you want to. Any other questions?